As the US elections draw closer, the chants against Joe Biden are growing louder. In the past 3 days, Pro Palestine protesters have taken over several cities in the US. And at the receiving end of the slogans is the incumbent president eyeing a re-election bid. These are visuals from outside a culture center in Joe Biden's childhood town of Scranton. Here, several supporters gathered from both sides of the spectrum. Some were local supporters, while others were pro-Palestine demonstrators. As the gathering waited for the US president to address them, many protesters could be heard chanting the slogan, "Biden, Biden, you can't hide, we charge you with genocide." Let's take a look at New York now, where dozens of Google employees are out on the streets to protest. Hundreds were seen raising objections against the company's billion-dollar contract with Israel. This is not a one-off incident where the people of America have accused their president of enabling a genocide. Just on Monday, protests were seen in the cities of Chicago and Seattle, where protesters waving Palestinian flags blocked key highways leading to the international airport. Then on Tuesday, protesters in San Francisco shut down the landmark Golden Gate Bridge, bringing traffic to a complete standstill. Hundreds of cars lined up on the suspended bridge as protesters chained themselves to parked vehicles. Police arrested about 20 protesters at the bridge, and traffic resumed in the afternoon. More than 6 months since Israel declared war on Gaza following Hamas's assault on October 7th. Regular protests have rocked the United States, and thousands raised questions over the country's foreign policy towards Israel. The protesters have accused the US government of being complicit in a genocide as Israeli forces continue to bombard across the Gaza Strip, with thousands already killed, and the number continues to rise. With less than 7 months left in the US elections, there is concern over how these protests play out for Joe Biden in the run-up to the presidential polls. On the show, we have talked about how the Arab Muslim community in the US is already miffed with Biden over his pro-Israel stance. Just a few days back, we saw how an annual White House event during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan was downsized to a meeting and dinner with staffers only, as Muslim and Arab leaders refused to attend a Ramadan dinner hosted by the US president. Now, the marches and demonstrations against Joe Biden give rise to two important questions. Will the mass protests reflect on the ballot for the Democrats, or can Biden count on domestic issues like abortion rights to overshadow the humanitarian crisis in Gaza that many say Washington is complicit in? Now, to take this further, we are being joined by Jonah Blank from Washington, D.C. He is the former foreign policy advisor to President Joe Biden and also a senior journalist and author. Mr. Blank, thank you so much for joining us here on WION. We have been seeing recurring protests across the United States who have been calling Joe Biden, the U.S. president, complicit in the alleged genocide that's taking place in the West Bank. I want to ask you, while we see these protests, how much of this can we see actually having an impact on the November ballot?
Well, thank you for having me. This is a very important question, and you're absolutely right. These protests are a very significant movement. This is not just a surface manifestation. This shows a deep alienation among some key groups that President Biden will have to regain the trust of in order to succeed in November. These include not just Muslim and Arab voters, but also young voters, progressive voters, people of color, and really anyone who is concerned about human rights in U.S. foreign policy.
Right. Mr. Blank, some might also argue that Joe Biden is at the behest of this because he's the incumbent president right now. Because what choice do the voters have? Even if it's Donald Trump or any other Republican who comes to power, the foreign policy of the United States has been pro-Israel for a long time now. So what choice do the voters have is my central question.
And that's a very good question, because even if you object to President Biden's policy in Israel and Gaza, Donald Trump is unquestionably far more hostile to Palestinian interests and far more supportive of the very furthest right wing in the Israeli political spectrum than Joe Biden is. That's been proven in the past, and it will definitely be even more so the case if he were to return to power. So the question is not really so much, will those who are disillusioned with President Biden on the issue of Gaza vote for Trump? It's, will they simply stay home or perhaps vote for a third-party candidate, which achieves the same thing?
Absolutely, Mr. Blank. You point to an important point there. Before I let you go, how much of a say when it comes to elections do the Arab and Muslim voters in the United States have?
Well, they're not typically one of the most high-profile swing groups, but they are disproportionately strong in states that will determine the election. Michigan, the most important of these, but also potentially including Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, even Arizona. And because all of these states have determined the elections of both 2016 and 2020 by such incredibly narrow margins, even a smallish group can have a determinative impact on the election.
All right, Mr. Blank, thank you so much for joining us here on WION and getting us all your insights.
Thank you for having me.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.